Hello, everybody, and welcome to Geopolitical Trends, where truth matters. I'm your host, Dr. David Oualaalou. Very excited to be with you. I will be addressing for you today a detailed narrative, if I may use the term, about what Donald Trump proposed regarding the ending the Gaza war. I mean, Trump is something, We all know, Trump is Trump. You're not gonna believe or trust whatever Trump says or even does. So this is what I'm going to be providing you my own analysis. How is that gonna go forward and what's in it? And also answer another fundamental question. Is this plan that Trump is introducing is nothing but another version of the Iraq invasion? You all remember, and as a matter of fact, Netanyahu was, as a matter of fact, behind the scenes, a lot of people do not know. I was in Washington at that time. Bibi was pushing behind the scenes, as a matter of fact, because of his push. That's where we end up on a false pretext, invading Iraq. So that's why I'm not going to trust what Trump is saying. So this is what I'm going to providing you my analysis about and how hypothetically should this move forward, which I don't see, how it's going to reshape the geopolitical landscape, not only when it comes down to the Arab-Israeli conflict, but the whole region writ large. So before I'll do this, let me say hi quickly to our wonderful community. Lian, good to see you. Willie Holman, Truth Seeker, as always, good to see you. Taiwan Still. Oh, yeah, I'm not here. Let me share this with the community. I will skip this one. I really, really dislike that tiny country and their policies. Don't want to disrupt your live broadcast, Dr. O. I appreciate you for that, and sad to see you go, because I always like your feedback and your insights and your contribution to the conversation on the chat box. But I respect your decision. So, Zhao Yang, good to see you. Army with Harmony. And Raphael Gant, salut à toi aussi, as always. I have one housekeeping item. I might be doing a topic for you tomorrow. I haven't decided yet because I'm working on some confirmation. And if I confirm that info, I will do it for you, because it's an important, this pertaining to Iran. You're going to need to know what's going on. So in this live today, I'm going to be doing some headlines. There are major developments going on. I'll move into the analysis, the first part. I'll do a history for the group, the Hamas. That is, you need to understand the history of its involvement. Then I conclude with the second part of my analysis about this, and I'll see if you have any question towards the end. I'll be happy to answer it for you. So first, let's start with the first headline, and I have some pictures I'm going to be sharing with you. So let me put the first one. This is an image of Zavra Gatz. You will know who she is. Now, here's the thing. It was reported that the CEO of Oracle, the one you are looking at her picture, Sarah or Safra, I'm sorry, Savra Gatz. So, which recently took over. That was the CEO of Oracle, which recently took over control of TikTok. So, and here is what happened. It was in a letter that was sent back in 2015, where she wrote that the love and respect for Israel must be instilled in the country, end of quote. This is what she wrote. And sort of that letter was sent to the former Israeli prime minister at that time, Ehud Barak, in 2015, and saying once again, and I quote, "We must fight the battle," end of quote, "before the children go to college." You all know what she meant by that. So suffice it to say that the report coming out of Washington stated that Katz wished to influence American public opinion in favor of Israel was fulfilled following a $14 billion deal to transfer ownership of TikTok from ByteDance, the culmination of efforts by the administration of former President Biden. This is not just Trump. That's why I'm saying Democrats and Republicans, two faces of the same coin. There is no good party here. So, and now you have the current president doing the bidding. And that is exactly where this particular CEO, Katz, expressed these positions while serving as a CEO of Oracle. Yeah. Very, very disturbing. So, uh, and by the way, she assumed now the position of a vice chairman of the board as of September 22nd. So, makes you just wonder. So, second one has to do with Morocco. All of a sudden, you got this eruption of demonstration that turned violence, which usually, when you have violence, when violence starts to take place, you have no right now or legitimacy whatsoever. I don't care where those demonstrations are. If they remain peaceful, that's a different story. So, but suffice it to say that I am noticing this uptick in demonstrations around the world. You're looking from Nepal to Bangladesh to Morocco to some other in France and so forth. So makes you just wonder. So suffice it to say that the prime minister of the government, his name is Aziz Akanush, who is, by the way, corrupted as any. As a matter of fact, these demonstrations are also calling for, accountability of members of the government. They're not calling for the resignation of the government, but accountability, and rightly so, because it was this guy, the prime minister per se, that's the one who were getting oil from Russia and selling it to Moroccans at a higher price. To me, like, why will this guy stay in the government? Hold him accountable, because that's a corrupted practice. And he is to my knowledge, he's a millionaire or billionaire, whatever that is. So suffice it to say that this guy was calling for his government is ready now for dialogue and discussion within the institutions in Morocco. So you're going to have to listen to what these youth are saying. So, and this is by Generation Z. There's a group called Generation Z 212. They're asking for legitimate sort of demands. The building of hospitals, so healthcare can be affordable to everybody, and a fair education. Because you have, and I've always argued this before, the problem in Morocco is that it has a massive young population between the age of 13 and 30 with nothing to do. That's usually a recipe for disaster. So, but you're going to have to hold the government accountable. When you have a corrupted prime minister, that set the tone for how things are. So, and Morocco, we need to focus on, creating jobs for the massive youth population instead of focusing on some, building stadiums for soccer and all that. Ain't gonna cut it. So that's just my opinion. Suffice it to say, it's surprising that the demonstrations took place, but they turned violent to a degree, and that it's a no-go because it'll defeat any legitimate reason for why. So, third story I have for you is from this young person, used to be a soccer player. She's from Colombia. She was in jail in China for 10 years. She was sentenced to 15 years. Her name is Juliana Lopez. Now she's going to be released 3 years prior to the end of her term in prison for a good behavior. But you need to understand the background story. She was a soccer player. And this Colombian soccer player ended up in prison. She was also a model. Why she ended up in prison is because when she went to China with her boyfriend in 2015, she was carrying 610 grams of cocaine hidden in her computer. How stupid of this teenager, of this youngster back then to do that. So the player, her name is, let me get it back, her name, Juliana Lopez. So what she didn't understand is that in China, I'm sure she did. How can you go to China and not understand the laws there? One of the things I had to read up about prior to my trip the first time is the certain laws in China, because I needed to understand how things work. So in China, drug trafficking is one of the most serious crimes and carries extremely severe penalties. So the country, China that is, and I applaud them for this, I really applaud China for this. They have zero tolerance for a policy towards drugs, and that, by the way, applies to foreigners and locals. So, and that in itself reflects the legislation that prescribes penalties ranging from a long-term prison to death penalty, depending on the quantities and type of substance consumed. So that's why Chinese authorities, and once again, I applaud them for this, dealing with drugs and dealing with corrupted people. They just sentenced the guy, the former agricultural minister, to death penalty with 2-year reprieve for taking $26 million in bribes. I wish we have something like this, both in dealing with corrupted members of Congress or anyone for that matter in the government, and dealing with drugs that, when you look at the streets here in America and how much drugs is used, and I wish we have something like that. And this is why the Chinese authorities do not differentiate between sort of a local citizen and foreigner. Anyone who get caught trafficking drugs faces severe consequences. Simple. That's as a matter of fact, I did find out, I read the law regarding to this, that if you are caught with 50 grams of heroin or methamphetamine, this one can result in a death penalty. No negotiations, no good behavior in prison, death penalty. Simple as that. And to me, it's the right thing to do so. But anyway, she was in a good behavior, and the Chinese authorities decided to release her now, I think 3 years prior to the term of her. The question is what she's going to do now. Because if she goes back, she was convicted a drug dealer. If she stays in China, she can't stay in China because she's a major felon in drugs. I don't think so the government will trust her. So the two other stories I'm working for you, one of them has to do with this one here. This is the Turkish intelligence just arrested this morning a Mossad agent in Istanbul. So I'm not going to say much about this. If I do live stream for you tomorrow, because I wanted to confirm some information for you. And the last one, which will be pertain most likely to the topic I'm going to be addressing about, it has to do with the statements from Avigdor Lieberman. He's the former prime minister of Israel. He's saying now that he's warning of a surprise Iranian attack on Israel. How ludicrous that is. So, but you all know what it means. You all know what it means, especially when I detail for you in this live stream why the movements of US tankers into Al Ubaid in Qatar. So we'll put this together. All right, let's get into our analysis here. I read different analysis regarding the deals that Trump proposed. So I'm going to be sharing with you some links, but I'm going to be reacting to some articles as well. So basically, a majority of the analysts in the Western Hemisphere, and I'm talking about the ones in Europe, there are some here in the US. I also read the analysis coming out of Chatham House in London. So most of them converge on one reality, and that reality is that Donald Trump's plan to stop the war in Gaza is kind of ambiguous. It's so vague and really make you shake your heads, makes you wonder. It raises eyebrows. So it's because so far the proposed so-called peace council, through the peace council, is exactly similar. Here is where the key is similar to what the US and Britain did. It was known to those who are familiar with what took place in 2003. The US-British strategy that followed the 2003 invasion of Iraq, because who was also pushing for that? It was none other than the criminal Tony Blair. So, which, by the way, Donald Trump wanted to appoint now Tony Blair to oversee this peace council. So, and this is exactly where the problem is. You can just ask yourself how fair Donald Trump is going to be. And second, if you are to do all this, you are not including the other party to the conflict. And this case is going to be the Hamas part. We're not talking about the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization. That's for Mahmoud Abbas. Mahmoud Abbas is under the thumb of both Israel and the US. Mahmoud Abbas is like wet noodles. You can flip-flop him any way you want. Why? It's because that's how the survival of that organization depends on funding. So he is obligated to do whatever he is asked to do. Hamas, on the other hand, is different. And when I do the history for you, you will understand why. And this is why some analysts from London, they described the plan essentially as, and I put this in quote, colonial deception, in quote. Because it makes sense. Once I share a clip with you, and I'll do the translation for you, put it in perspective, which is basically amounts to nothing but the continuation of this turmoil that exists in Gaza. There are those who argue the two-state solution, might be viable. The question is, will Israel go to the 1967 border? I have my doubts. But even if that happens, which on one point in my work, because now, hypothetically, and I'm going to just throw this out for you, thinking outside the box. Hypothetically, we go with the two-state solutions, because now if there is any attack on Israel, it's going to have the right to self-defense. And the same argument goes for the other states. If there is any attack by Israel inside the Palestinian territory, then it will be they have the right to defend themselves. So the two-state solutions can be good, but also I can see why there is a hesitation on part of the Israelis. Why? Because if you go with that, the majority will be on the Palestinian side, not on the Israeli, because there are only 9 million Israelis live inside Israel. So it has, the good and bad to it. But again, who are we to decide for that? So sort of put it on the table and let people decide for that one. So you have, for example, I read an article from the British Independent magazine. And they argued that, rightly so, that Donald Trump's peace plan for Gaza appears at first glance as sort of a breakthrough. Because now Trump is aiming for anything, listen carefully, for anything to score a political victory. Because so far, every policy he embarked on turns out to be a disaster, especially when it comes down to foreign policy. I know he's embarking on the immigration right here in the US. If you only guys know, which the media is not disclosing, now when you walk into Portland, in Portland, when you go into Michigan, when you go into certain parts of Tennessee and you see the military, you will think, am I in America or am I in a war zone? Or this has to do with immigration. But that's not how you deal with this kind of issues. I understand we have an issue of immigration. We are a nation of immigrants. All of us came from somewhere. There is no secret about it. On the other hand, that immigration has to be controlled in. I truly, truly liked the way the Chinese deal with this. You have the control through your passport, whatever movements you go. They know who you are, because if you have a valid visa, then you are allowed into the country, no questions asked. I was never pulled aside and asked for, oh, I need to see your visa. They never asked me for this. They did the control at the airport. When I took the speed train, I checked in with my passport because they have the information there. And in other words, the country knows who is in and who is going out. I wish we have something we don't. The border, I live in Texas. I'm only about 4.5 hours from the border, or 5 hours, something like that. It's like La La Land. But at the same time, you don't go about it this way, in this manner. That's like the war on drugs. How long, for my American audience, how long we've been fighting the war on drugs? There was no war on drugs. It's just on the papers, waste money. Look how the Chinese dealing with the war on drugs. If anybody was caught with drugs, like this particular youngster, the Juliana Lopez, who had this 60 grams of cocaine, whatever, 15 years in prison. She's lucky. She's lucky. She could be sentenced. But again, they put the requirements for heroin and methamphetamine, that will be automatically death penalty. And a good way of dealing with that. So And suffice it to say that Trump's peace plan appears at first glance, as I said, like a breakthrough, when in reality there is nothing on it. If you only know what Trump has in mind of turning the Gaza Strip into, because he wants to build whatever needs to build, and that's not only for him, is for his son-in-law also, who happens to be, his father was a Jewish real estate in New Jersey. And this, to me, it's like what the article described, and I put it in quote because it's their word, is well-crafted colonial ploy. Because what will be the aim of it? It's nothing but extending the domination over the Palestinians. It's a bit of the Israeli one. And Israeli people themselves. I talked to some Israeli friends. I talk to them and we talk openly, respectfully. We disagree, but we still can have a civil conversation. And they all disclose to me that people inside Israel are not with this policy of Netanyahu. To the point that you can't just be going willy-nilly, do whatever. And you have even, I had a chance to read an analysis by Naomi Bar Yaakov. I have a picture of her. I hope so. No, I don't. I thought I had a picture. In any event, she's a researcher at the Geneva Center for Security Policy. And I know, this center because I used to be a member in that center back in the day. So, and even though I disagree with her in certain aspects, but she was right on say others. For example, when she mentioned that Hamas will most likely demand further clarifications and guarantees, which makes more sense. Hamas is not going to take this, whatever Trump has said, let alone Mr. Trump is threatening them. You only have 3 days. That is not a way of how to resolve conflicts. That is not a way of bullying your way into. And second, what makes Trump think that Hamas is going to flinch just because he issued a statement? Do you remember when he said the same to the Russians? And the Russians were just laughing. So he said the same about taking background from the Taliban, and the Taliban were just like laughing. We become a laughing stock because of the ill-conceived policies he's embarking on. And that is exactly where the problem is for. Second thing, this researcher added, and I can see why, is that Benjamin Netanyahu will not put the plan to a vote in his cabinet unless it is amended. And there were already amendments into this proposal from Trump. So basically, what Trump proposed is different from what he said to the Arab world. So I'm going to be playing a clip for you. I'll do the simultaneous translation for you. Then we'll continue our conversation. So take a listen, please.
انتهى الرئيس الأمريكي دونالد ترامب من اجتماعه مع نتنياهو في البيت الأبيض.
Donald Trump just concluded his meeting in the White House with Bibi Netanyahu.
حتى خرج في مؤتمر صحفي.
And in press conference,
للإعلان عن خطة شاملة.
He announced about the complete plan
لإنهاء الصراع في غزة.
To end the conflict in Gaza.
وأصدر البيت الأبيض بيانا شرح فيه بنود الخطة.
And the White House issued statements disclosing the items in this particular proposal.
أولها أن تكون غزة منطقة منزوعة.
The first of all is that Gaza, as a whole, the whole region, will have to be disarmed completely, which I don't think so.
السلاح ولن يجبر سكانها على مغادرة القطاع.
And the residents will not leave. Let me make sure of this here. I'm sorry, I have to go back.
ولن يجبر سكانها على مغادرة القطاع.
ولن يجبر, which means we are not be forced not to leave the Gaza.
ثانيا سيتم نزع سلاح حماس.
Second thing is you have to disarm Hamas.
بحيث لا يكون لها دور في حكم غزة.
This way Hamas will not have any role in governing Gaza.
وسيدار القطاع مؤقتا.
And the Gaza will be temporarily managed
عبر لجنة فلسطينية انتقالية من
by a transitional Palestinian council
التكنوقراط
of technocrats,
مسؤولة عن إدارة الخدمات العامة تحت إشراف هيئة انتقالية
which will manage to do the social services, but it will be under the authority
دولية
of a peace council, which is an international one,
يرأسها ترامب.
which will be sort of headed by Trump, which basically, you know, when Trump said he's going to appoint Tony Blair.
تسمى مجلس السلام.
And this council will be named the Peace Council.
عندها ستعمل الولايات المتحدة مع شركائها.
This way, the United States at that time will work in coordination with its allies
على إنشاء قوة استقرار دولية
to sort of establish an international stabilizing force,
مؤقتة تنتشر في غزة على
which will be spread across Gaza.
الفور. بعدها ستوضع خطة لإعادة إعمار غزة.
After that, a plan for reconstruction will be put forth
من خلال تشكيل لجنة من الخبراء.
and this will be through the establishment of a council that is made of comprised of experts. I wonder who these experts are.
رئيس الوزراء الإسرائيلي بنيامين نتنياهو قال إنه يدعم خطة ترامب.
Bibi he stated on the record that, I support Donald Trump's proposal
أنها تتوافق مع الأهداف الخمسة
because it is sort of what's the word he used? It's almost similar to the plan, the 5-point plan he proposed that his government, meaning Netanyahu's government, agreed upon.
التي وضعها لإنهاء الحرب.
And those are the five key points for ending the war.
I support your plan to end the war in Gaza.
أدعم خطتك لإنهاء الحرب في غزة والتي تحقق أهدافنا.
I support your plan to end the war in Gaza, which support our sort of proposal.
خطتكم تتماشى مع المبادئ الخمسة.
Your plan goes exactly with what we have proposed, the five key points in our plan.
التي وضعتها حكومتي لإنهاء
That was introduced and proposed by my government
الحرب واليوم
to end the war.
التالي بعد حماس.
تنص الخطة أيضا على إطلاق جميع الأسرى الإسرائيليين الأحياء.
The proposal by Trump also suggests the release of all Israeli prisoners, and even the dead individuals, they have to return the bodies to the Israelis.
وإعادة جثامين الأموات خلال 72 ساعة.
And this will have to be done within 72 hours, which is unrealistic anyway.
بالمقابل
In return for doing that, by releasing the prisoners who are alive and the dead bodies of the Israelis to return. In return for that,
تفرج إسرائيل عن 250 سجينا.
Israel will free 250 Palestinian prisoners.
فلسطينيا من ذوي الأحكام
Among those with the life sentences, that's been sentenced for life to be in prison, there will be 250. Some among them will be released.
مؤبدة بالإضافة إلى 1700
In addition to 1,700 detainees,
من معتقلي ما بعد السابع من
those who's been detained after October 7th from Gaza.
أكتوبر. بمجرد قبول هذه البنود
The moment this proposal is accepted,
من الطرفين
which is accepted by both parties,
تدخل المساعدات إلى غزة عبر الأمم المتحدة.
the aid assistance is going to enter Gaza through the UN
والهلال الأحمر.
and the Red Cross.
يتم إعادة تأهيل البنية التحتية وسيعفى عن عناصر حماس الذين
And members of Hamas who will lay down their arms will be pardoned.
يسلمون أسلحتهم ويقبلون بالعيش السلمي.
And as long as they accept to live in peace.
سيسمح لمن يرغب منهم بمغادرة.
However, for those who wanted to leave Gaza will be allowed to do so.
القطاع. الخطة ذكرت أيضا أن إسرائيل لن تحتل قطاع.
This is the key one here. I want you to pay close attention. Here is what Israel is saying, according to the announcer here, is that Israel said it will not occupy
غزة
It will not occupy Gaza
ولن تضمها.
and will not take over.
نشر البيت الأبيض هذه الخريطة.
This map was released by the White House, not Israel, by the White House.
ترون هذه الخط الأزرق؟
Do you see this blue line?
جميل. الخط الأزرق، هذه المنطقة الزرقاء ستنسحب منها إسرائيل.
This blue line, where do you see this stretches? That's where the Israel is going to withdraw from this particular blue line, as you see on the map.
إلى الخط الأصفر.
However, Israel is going to withdraw just from that blue line into the yellow line
عند عملية الإفراج عن الرهائن.
once the hostages are released.
ثم ستنسحب بعدها إلى الأحمر.
After that, the Israelis will withdraw to the red line.
هنا هذا الأحمر الذي يقول مع استقرار القوى الدولية.
Once the international force is in the on the ground, because to secure stability.
أما المرحلة النهائية هنا
And the final phase,
فستكون في المنطقة المظللة والتي
and it's gonna be in this shaded area right here that you see on the map,
تشكل المنطقة العازلة.
which will basically represent the independent location. That's the term they used.
آراء وتعليقات كثيرة تفاعلت مع خطة ترامب. مصطفى،
There are some comments about this, so I'm going to stop it right here because I need to move on into the analysis here. Suffice it to say, that should give you an idea as to what Trump is thinking in terms of this didn't hear it right here. They didn't disclose all this in detail. So because again, they meaning Washington, they are controlling the outlets of media outlets right here, so Americans stays in the dark completely. I just read yesterday what the Department of Defense now is going to be doing. They're going to put everybody in the box. You know what I mean by the box? That's the lie detector. Everybody's going to go because they wanted to control the information, and nothing will be released without the approval. Like I said yesterday or the day before, we are descending into a police state. So here is what's interesting is that the Pakistani foreign minister, so here is what he stated, and his name is Mohammed Ishaq. He stated that Trump's Gaza plan differ completely from a document that he saw. And when they saw this one, that was during the meeting they had with Trump. Here they are, all of some of representatives of the Muslim. They're just pathetic, and I don't shy away from saying this. So completely different from what he proposed. To me, if they had a really shred of dignity, they'll say to him, sorry, we're not going to sit down with you. What for? You can't be trusted. You are not an honest broker, and you have been contributing to what's going on in Gaza. Simple as that. But they won't say that. They won't say that. It's, you all know why. So, and the foreign minister of Pakistan argued that what exactly Donald Trump proposed differed from what has been talked about prior to the release of this document. So the foreign minister also, his plan had been amended. This recent plan has been amended. And he said, and I quote, adding, I made it clear that these 20 points announced by Trump are not our points. They are not the same as our points. I am saying that some changes have been made to them, to the draft we had. End of quote. You know, it was also reported by the American Axios that revealed, confirmed what the foreign minister of Pakistan said, is that the version that announced by Trump included significant amendments requested by Netanyahu. This is why I am starting to feel comfortable saying that Donald Trump is scared of Bibi. Simple as that. Think of it any way you want. But I am growing convinced of this fact. He is scared of Netanyahu. And he's not going to oppose what Bibi said because they control the US government. And by the way, this doesn't apply just to Trump, to Republicans. It applies to Democrats as well. So this is exactly, as a matter of fact, it was an Israeli journalist. I had to dig this out, who is close to the prime minister, Bibi Netanyahu. His name is Amit Sigo. You can Google him up. And he is close ally of Bibi. In other words, if Bibi wants to have a positive coverage, this guy will do it. So he stated that all proposals, listen carefully, all the proposals are the plans of the Minister of Strategic Affairs inside Bibi Netanyahu's government. And his name is Ron Dermer. So all the plans you made has nothing to do with America. Those plans have been provided. As a matter of fact, I am aware that, usually when you do the PDB, the Presidential Daily Briefing, usually the top analysts in the Central Intelligence Agency, or sometimes even the director himself, will go and brief Donald Trump. When Donald Trump came to power, either now or before, that PDB talking points were provided by the Israelis. So you read between the lines. And this is exactly where the concern moving forward into this plan. Liking this video so far? Don't just be a watcher. Go ahead and hit the like, share, and subscribe button. And don't forget to tap the bell so you will not miss any of my videos or live streams. This way, you will be supporting a channel that stands for the truth and objective reporting. The choice is yours. Thanks for your support. Indeed. Please make sure to subscribe. So what I'm going to do now for you guys is I want to provide you a brief history of how Hamas came to be, because you need to understand, again, the background. Then I'll continue with my conversation regarding the analysis part. And I'm going to provide you a link for an article that I read, and I'm going to be using some of it here because I got to give credit where credit is due. Let me put the link. Ramples 01 PDB is the presidential. It's PDB, Presidential Daily Briefing. That's usually a document that is provided every morning to the White House, to the president, for him or her, if we ever have a female president, to know exactly about the hot button issues around the world. That's the briefings of the intelligence agencies from around the world in coordination with the CIA, and that's what the PDB is. All right, let me talk to you about, just briefly, as I said, I had a chance to read an article by Danilo Haulishka. I'm sorry. He did a good job on this article particularly. And I'm going to just share some key points because you need to understand the history from its inception. So when you think about the group of Hamas from its inception, because what Hamas decided to do from the beginning wasn't about just negotiations, it was about also armed resistance. And the objective to it was to sort of liberate Palestine from the Israeli occupation. So without understanding that history, you will be left without seeing one of the key issues as to why the possibility of the conflict persisting, it might be a foregone conclusion. And this one has to do with how Hamas took its name to begin with. And he took it from the Arabic acronym that is in English stands for the equivalency office of the Islamic Resistance Movement. That is how it's all started. So the group Hamas, that's where it took this particular name from. And its roots goes way back. When I say way back, you have to go back to the almost 1977, 1978, late 70s. And this is where the group established some charities. And the charities were also to provide social services like clinics, health clinics, like schools. And they all were concentrated in Gaza Strip and the West Bank. And of course, because those were occupied both after in 1967. This is what I'm saying. If there is a two-state solution, one of the sticky points is going to be whether they will be back to the borders of 1967, which I don't see Israel agreeing to that. But again, it might be if there will be a different prime minister. So after that, after this particular era, Hamas was formally established. It was a decade later, which was in 1987. And he was a particular individual by the name Sheikh Ahmed Yassin. He passed away. And he's the one who established this after the outbreak of the Palestinian uprising known as the First Intifada, the uprising. If you recall the history of the Intifada, the first one. And the following year, meaning 1988, Hamas declared that liberating Palestine from Israel was every Muslim religious duty. I think they were wrong about that. Sorry to say this, I'm not laughing out of laughing, but to count on the Muslim world into this, except take Iran and Yemen out. But the rest, no, you can't count on that. No, because we're seeing what's going on. But anyway, that's what they did back then. And that is why when Hamas moved into armed operations, that's when the first attack on Israel by Hamas came in 1989. And that involved the abduction and it involved the killing of two soldiers, Israeli soldiers. And that in itself paved the way for the arrest of Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, the founder of Hamas at that time. Of course, the Israelis released Yassin later on, another decade later, in 1997, in exchange for the release of Mossad agents who had tried to assassinate Hamas political bureau chief. At that time, his name was Khalid Mish'al. And he had an office in Jordan. So the Israelis knew about Hamas having a location in Jordan, in Amman. So they were trying this, but they were arrested, the Mossad agents. And that's where the swap deal between Israel and Hamas happened. And that is where in 2005, and I was aware of this because I was following it closely. Why? Because there were elections in 2006. So in 2005, Hamas entered the political scene and won a landslide victory in parliament elections the next year, meaning 2006, beating its rival Fatah or Fatah. You have rivals within Israel. That's what I'm saying. You have to understand these complications, this web of intricacies within Israel. Not all are on the same sheet of music. Mahmoud Abbas, as I said, is wet noodle. Yasser Arafat in himself has been playing both sides. When you have his family was living in Paris, and I did the research, and I have the proof. When $10 million was wired from Switzerland to Paris one day after his passing. And the money went, of course, to his wife, who was still probably living in Paris, living a lavish lifestyle while using the Palestinian cause. That's why I never trusted the PLO. But in any event, the Hamas won the elections. And that because that's what the people in Gaza Strip and West Bank wanted. And at that time, it became a problem for us in the US. And I argued, even I had some arguments. I said, well, wait a minute. If we are supporting free elections, here is the outcome of free elections. You know, the same thing I argued about Egypt. When Egyptians, which by the way, they are now being as oppressed as he can get. So that is the whole idea of how when Egyptians voted for Mohammed Morsi, and I wrote on articles about it. Of course, they were cleared by the government at that time because I had to clear my stuff with the government. And then I said, no, I'm just making the argument. If we argue for free elections, then here is the outcome. We ought to respect it. No, you don't go and coordinate with the Saudis to conduct a coup by the military through Abdel Fattah Sisi, who was the head of the military at that time, because we're the one who put him in. What is the first thing General Sisi, corrupted, another corrupted individual, did? Arrested Mohammed Morsi. You know, where is the justification for all this? So if we are to say we stand for free elections, and when the outcome does not come to our likes, we should respect it. That is where the problem was with Hamas when they won the election, because that's what the people voted for. So, and that's after this, 1987, I was following this, when tensions between the two factions started and led to a conflict that will end with Hamas in charge of Gaza, while Fatah held the West Bank. That is now, you see, the reason why this plan wanted to isolate and the Palestinians. The mistake that the West, I'm sure the Israelis understand that, but here in Washington and the Western audience do not understand that Hamas is part of the fabric of society within Palestine. You won't be able to differentiate or separate them from that. And this is why when you look at both the European and the United States, went ahead and classified Hamas as a terrorist group. So, however, we did that way, but others saw it as, and still see it till today, as a resistance movement. So it depends again which aisle of the political spectrum you are in to understand that. Suffice it to say, over the years that Hamas conducted this armed resistance has ebbed and flowed, but it's remained committed to the fight. This is why I'm saying this plan, and the author of the article did a wonderful job. Danilo really described this in detail. So make sure you read that particular article I shared with you. So, and this leads us to the questions and doubts that are now, everybody who is in the know in understanding the complications of the Arab-Israeli conflict will put this. Once again, I had a chance to read an analysis by an analyst. She's the director of the Middle East and North Africa in the Chatham House. I might bring her over to the channel here for a conversation. Her name is Sanam Vakil. Let me share a picture with you. Very, very articulated lady. She knows what she's talking about. Her background is in geopolitics. And so I might bring her over here when I have a conversation. But she did raise some sort of legitimate questions. Is that this proposal in itself raised questions and doubts? So the suggestion, the fact that we are suggesting Tony Blair should oversee the so-called Peace Council, that just makes you just shake your head. We all know the reputation of Tony Blair and what he did, because Blair's reputation have damaged already the UK, not only domestically but abroad. So, except that Tony Blair will be the beating for Donald Trump, because Tony Blair won't be able to do anything without bowing to Donald Trump and Bibi Netanyahu's decisions. So, and this is where that problem of this council, as Sanam argued, and I couldn't agree with her, especially when it comes down to how you see it in the Middle East. Why? Because this particular council will have a little or no accountability, and that is problematic in itself. So, the second thing she raised, the key concern she raised, and I agree with her, there are no really details or substance to clarify exactly what is what I shared with you earlier in the clip. That was what the analysts, based on what the White House stated, but that is not enough detail to understand. The second thing is where Hamas falls into all this. Where is that part of the equation? And what makes us think that Hamas is going to agree to that? So Donald Trump issuing that threat, you only have 72 hours. No, that doesn't work that way. So because like she argued, and I couldn't agree more, is that this proposal, it's left wide open and vague. And open for what? For any interpretation that can push the agenda forward. So it was an individual without, I don't have the name because I wanted to remain anonymous. And this individual, it was a source. So he sort of disclosed that officials from Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey had a meeting with Hamas delegation. Why? Because they wanted to discuss this U.S. proposal, Donald Trump proposal. So, but what Hamas stated is that, sure, we'll be happy to study this and we'll get back to you. But also made it clear that this language of threat, it's not going to work. So that was the subtle way of telling Trump, no need for this bullying because it's not going to cut it with us. And what this source stated and explained is that Hamas delegation confirmed that it will work on this particular proposal by Donald Trump, and it will present an official response as soon as the consultations concludes, which means consultations among the various leaders within the group. And that's usually how it's supposed. It's supposed to be consensus. So the same source disclosed that the meeting between officials from Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey and Hamas represented part of that technical discussions. Why? Because they wanted to formulate some sort of the final point to all this. But on the other hand, makes you just wonder, are you going to also trust what the Qataris are saying, or the Turks, or the Egyptians, especially when you consider what's going on right now in Qatar as we speak? The same country that is allowing now the U.S. Strato tanker surge. This is the Strato tankers right here. There is a surge of those planes towards Al Ubaid, U.S. base in Qatar, which is raising now serious questions, and the questions pertaining to the possibility for another strike on Iran. Don't rule that out, and I will do a detail for you tomorrow if I get a chance, because I have some other stuff I need to do tomorrow. So if I get a chance, I'll do it for you. So, and here is what I found so far, is that an open source intelligence tracked those flights and showed the massive U.S. force deployment of those what's called Strato tankers, known as the KC-135, from the Atlantic to Qatar. Is this just a coincidence? What's even more that makes you have to think, you coincide these movements of this KC-130 with the recent meeting in Quantico in Virginia with Donald Trump and Hegseth and 800 top generals in the military. Don't fall for the hypes and all this hoopla. Don't fall for that. You don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And that is, this move coincided with the secretive Quantico military summit and the rising tensions with Iran. This is why Iran went ahead and prepared everything. So, and I will confirm with you tomorrow one specific information pertaining to this. And this is why the open tracker using the OSINT account, this is the the open intelligence source. You're looking now at an escalation of tensions. This is why Lieberman came forward and said, oh, Iran might strike Iran. So that means we have to strike first. Iran has no intentions of striking Israel. They won't do it. But if Iran is attacked, it's going to be a nightmare for Israel, because this time around, Iran is prepared. And I mean it in true sense of the word. So I'll share detailed with you tomorrow if I get a chance to do this. So suffice it to say, all this, in my opinion, and I'll conclude with this, there is no way, in my opinion, that this new proposal sort of will be approved by the Israelis unless the items on that particular proposal have already been amended, which they did, but I also don't see how Hamas is going to agree to all this. So in addition to that, because Israel can give a veto power over the process, how, you may say, or how you may ask, is because they can pressure the US if this will end up at the UN Security Council, because we already did veto everything else. We're the only one. So and this is again where I see this moving forward. What they are arguing is, we wanted to see this, the Israeli part arguing, we wanted to see this in 3 phases of the withdrawal are completed. So, and the Israeli forces will remain in a security zone inside Gaza. I don't think so it's gonna settle away with that. Of course, when you hear some Arab Muslim countries, the likes of Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, Turkey, have expressed anger at the amendments, don't fall for that. Yes, they did, but it's all for show. It's all for show. Let this picture speak to you. It's all for show. No more, no less. They have no standing whatsoever. They can't. They're too weak. Why? Because the importance is about the survival of the regime, as I always share this with you to let you know. So Israel already, some voices inside Israel are rejecting this. And this was reported by none other than the National Security Minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, already saying that the proposed agreement is dangerous to Israeli security, is full of loopholes, and does not achieve the government's war goal. Well, there will be no war goals to begin with, because so far Israel failed to achieve its objective. And this is where I see the danger, not only about the Gaza, I'm seeing the big problem about Iran. Because what Israel is going to do, what Bibi Netanyahu wants to do, is to pull the US once again into fighting the war against Iran under the pretext of the Gaza. This is where my fear is, because this time around it's going to be pretty. And I don't know, Trump doesn't have a say into all this. Trump can talk loud and all that, but at the end he will bow to the pressure from Netanyahu. That's the only way I see it. So, all right, that's all I have to share with you here. We are right at the top of the hour here, so I appreciate you being here. Appreciate you sharing your conversation with the community here. And as I said, tomorrow, if I have a chance, I will do the live for you. I have some things I need to take care of, and if I do, I do. If I don't, I have to wait a few more days. So let me see here. I'll share this with Al-Maut Qabla Al-Am. They are doing the same thing now in Venezuela. History repeats itself. You're absolutely correct, and you guys need to know. Again, I didn't get a chance to do. U.S. is flying now the F-35 near the. That's an intimidation. No need for that. The Russians not going to stand idle because Venezuela is very crucial, and it depends again how this thing is going to move forward. I am keeping an eye on it to see if this will manifest itself into something else. We shall see. So to those who wants to support the channel, here is the link. I will greatly appreciate your support. And if you want to purchase a copy of my books, here is the link for it. I'll take this opportunity to say thank you for keeping the conversation civil in the chat box. and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow if my schedule permits. So I'm going to do my best to make it happen. So as always, remember, geopolitics impact your daily life in more ways than one. Till next time. Bye-bye.